Its official name is the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, but most people call it the Boneyard. Basking in the hot Arizona sun are 4,400 aircraft. Bombers, fighters, big transport planes, jump jets, helicopters, and some prototypes that you'll see here and nowhere else. Aircraft flown by the US Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, and even the US Coast Guard. There are 70 different types of aircraft. Some are in mothballs and may be used again. Many will be scrapped and melted down. Some will be used as a source of spare parts to keep others in the air. This is a melancholy place, a bit like a penitentiary. Aeroplanes, after all, were designed to fly, not sit in the dirt waiting for the chop. But these planes, at least most of them, are on death row. People come here because they have a sentimental attachment to old aeroplanes. But it's only a matter of time before most of them are turned into saucepans. The Boneyard is full of dead aircraft, but it shares the airfield with living ones, the A-10 tank busters of the United States Air Force. They've been storing and scrapping planes here since 1946. In those days, it was DC-3s and B-29 bombers. Later, they started scrapping the enormous 10-engine B-36. A great many aircraft here are still in service. These F-111s still fly with the Royal Australian Air Force, now the only Air Force to use them. This, of course, is where Australia got its second-hand F-111s from, the bargain basement sale of the century. We're getting rid of them, maybe in 2010, 2012, but they've still got a few more for sale here. Engineers are constantly driving around this 5 square kilometre airfield. They have their toolboxes and their ladders, and their task is to remove spare parts off an aircraft, which can be used to keep another one in the air. Gil Kent has been an aircraft engineer for 40 years. He was one of the team which pulled the wings off F-111s to keep the Australian aircraft flying.
Hey, Bert. Yeah. Give me some open ones.
The wings on the F-111 swivel backwards, secured by this wing box bearing, but the aircraft has to be placed on perfectly flat ground to pull the wings from the joint.
And in order to pull,
that pin. In order to get that to come out, you have to have the wing correctly positioned, okay? The aircraft level, and then you can pull that pin out. If you don't, you're not going to have a very happy day.
The AMARG facility saves the US government a lot of money. It's much cheaper to retrieve spare parts from aircraft than to make new ones. In 2007, they reclaimed parts worth $700 million US.
There are aircraft out here that we have in here now that are still flying, okay? And if they weren't here, then some of the items that are needed to follow through on a combat mission would not be available.
Sure.
So these birds aren't really dead. They're alive and kicking and still giving back too.
Sure.
You know, they're not dead anymore. I mean, it's not a graveyard. You might want to call it that, but it's a place where they still live on. Pieces and parts of them do.
Over the years, about 20% of the aircraft that come to AMARG are returned to flying status. There are some odd-looking birds. This is an FA-18, but it's been painted up in Russian colours with a star on the tail. It's pretending to be an aggressor aircraft, and it used to be flown by the Navy Fighter Weapons School. When an aircraft arrives at the Boneyard, all the fuel is drained from the tanks, and then the fuel system is flushed with a light oil. The canopy is oiled and then covered with a white plastic material called Spraylat. This keeps the temperature inside the aircraft cool and stops the perspex canopy from crazing and going yellow. This F-16 is going through the first stage of preservation, having all its crevices covered over with duct tape. Later, it'll have its cockpit covered up with Spraylat. Every few months, the engines of many of these aircraft are started up and run for a few minutes. It looks like the inside of a cathedral, but this is what's left of a Lockheed C-5A Galaxy after it's had its wings and the engines removed.